Well, hey, this is Rhonda Simmons, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Simmons Empowerment Foundation and Rhonda L. Simmons LLC. I am so excited to be with you today because we are continuing our Overcomers series. I'm telling you, I have said this over and over in every episode that I've had guests that I have met some of the best people this side of heaven. Today is no exception. And I know you keep hearing me say the same thing, but it's true. I'm not lying. I'm telling you the truth. We have just had some of the best times with people from all over the world, all walks of life, who have overcome uh, seemingly insurmountable odds and have really risen to a new level that is just greater than anything they could have expected. And so they're not here on my show to boast about, oh, I made it, and I'm all this and all that, and how great they are. They're here to encourage you that just like they made it and they survived and now are thriving, so can you. So sit back, enjoy the episode. And again, welcome to Empowered Heart to Heart. Before I introduce our next guest, I want to make sure that you like, comment, and share this video if you're watching on our YouTube channel. And make sure you subscribe and hit the notifications button so that you'll know every single time I upload a video. Let me tell you, I hit 2024 running. I hit the ground running, doing lots of podcast episodes, way more than before, because people have stories and I want to get them out. I want to connect with the right people so that you can be connected with their stories and realize that you are not alone. There are other people who are going through things very similar to your situation, and if they can make it, so can you. As our tagline says, this podcast is all about a holistic approach to empowering women by offering messages of hope, conversations that heal, and interviews that empower. And this is no different today. I am so glad to have a guest with us today. Let me tell you about my guest today. She is an extraordinary woman. She's an attorney. So y'all, got to be on your P's and Q's today, okay? She's an attorney, and she's the recipient of the Governor's Award for Advocacy for Survivors of Domestic Violence. She has triumphed over a narcissistic abuse. She's been through 2 marriages, both to narcissistic husbands. And she's harnessed the transformative power of emotional freedom techniques. And she uses EFT to guide others on their path to healing and personal growth. And so her own transformation came when she shifted from why me to for me. Oh, I am so excited. I can't wait to hear her incredible story today. Let me tell you, get something to drink, pull up an easy chair, and get ready to learn something today from none other than Miss Stephany Ann. Welcome to the show, Stephany.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on your show today, Rhonda.
Absolutely, absolutely. I tell you, you have such an amazing story of surviving 2 marriages to narcissistic men and all of the emotional abuse that came with that. Wow, I applaud you for being able to walk away.
Thank you. It wasn't easy, but I
No
did
doubt.
it, and here I am.
No doubt. So tell me about the moment when you got that epiphany of shifting from why me to for me. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I was actually at my sister's house, just laying on the bathroom floor, just tears streaming down my face. Like, why me? I didn't do anything wrong. Like, why me? I'm a good person. I did everything right. If you look at, I lived a good life. I was a good mom, a good wife. Like, why me? Why is all this stuff happening to me? Yet in that moment, I could not see past the pain and suffering that had engulfed my life. And, I spent over 17 years within these 2 marriages. I had multiple losses. I lost a house in a fire. I lost a house in a hurricane. I had a baby born with an extremely rare genetic disorder. And it was like, And then my second husband, his ex-wife died, leaving us 3 more boys. So here I am, I had 6 little boys under the age of 14, and all this psychological and emotional abuse going on, and just, "Why me, God?" And in that moment, I literally could not see, like I said, past the pain and suffering. I actually had lost my eyesight on top of everything. I lost my eyesight. And I just really felt at that moment, God was saying, the divine was saying to me, "Stephany, you're not seeing your story through the right lens." And I physically could not see my story, and also, spiritually, or, metaphysically, metaphorically, whatever. I couldn't see my story. I was blinded by it, and I was really stuck in this victim mindset for so long. For 17 years, I was stuck in this victim mindset of, "Why me? Why is all this stuff happening?" And it was in that moment where, I felt when the divine was saying, "Stephany, you're not seeing your story through the right lens." I needed to shift that perspective. I needed to let go of the victim story that kept me stuck, and I needed to become the hero of my own story. I needed to be the star. And how many of us are like that? We are side characters in our story. We should be the star of our story. And so, this transformation came to me when I shifted from why me to for me. And when I was able to do that, instead of seeing my two ex husbands as monsters trying to destroy my life and trying to destroy me, I actually could see them as teachers. And when I was able to see them as teachers, I could see the lessons. And when you see the lessons, you know what needs to be healed and what needs to be released. And then you can break the patterns, and then you can find true freedom.
Wow. Wow. That is amazing. That is amazing. So I'm just blown away, because I've been through divorce before. I'm remarried now. And so I know the pain of divorce. You know, no matter what the situation was, it's always an unhappy situation. When your marriage is ending in divorce. And you, like you said, you go through the why me's. What could I have done better? Man, I'm so impressed that you were able to get the closure that you needed so that you can go on.
Well,
Right.
it's, when you're in a relationship with a narcissist, you're not really getting closure per se. There's no conversations. It is, you know, it's just done. You block them on everything, on all platforms, all social media. You just stop talking to them. Sometimes you have to block their whole family, block friends, and you have to know that, the discard is your closure, and you just
Wow.
have to move on from that. So yeah, 2 marriages, no conversations afterwards, nothing. It's just that's what you have to do to protect yourself and your family.
Wow, that's amazing. Were your children a motivator to you?
They were, um, my first marriage, it ended in, um, affairs, and so, he walked away and just left us when the kids were little. And my second husband, yeah, it to get the children out, but it was also for me as well, and I always tell people it's complicated. Being in a relationship with a narcissist is very complex. It's very complicated. There's the trauma bond. There's been a lot of years of emotional and psychological abuse. And, if you look at domestic violence, like 20, 30 years ago, when I was doing more of my advocacy work, domestic violence was really focused on physical violence, not on the psychological and emotional violence. And so, you know, over time, it just wears you down. The relationship becomes a burden. It becomes really hard. You have this trauma bond, and it's challenging. But I always tell people, when you find the inner strength within you and the worthiness within you, you will leave, or you'll be discarded by the narcissist.
Wow. What a powerful word choice you just used. Discarded. Like like trash. You discard trash. And so
Yeah.
is that a is that a good depiction of how being in a relationship with a narcissist feels like?
It does, and so if you look at the cycle of narcissistic abuse, there's 3 stages. So the first stage is the idolization stage. This is where they put you on a platform, they mirror your values, they mirror you, you essentially fall in love with yourself, and you don't know all of this is going on. You think you have found the perfect partner. They understand you, they get you. They'll even say things like, "Oh, we're soulmates. God sent you to me. I've been praying for you. Here you are." Lots of communication, and they are. If it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true.
Mm,
And so, then the next stage is the devaluation. And so once I got have you hooked in the idolization phase, then the devaluation phase comes off. This is where their mask comes off. And so now everything they loved about you, all of a sudden they hate about you. Everything you thought you knew about them, you don't know about them because they were just projecting and mirroring your hobbies. And now it's like, oh, I'm into all these things. My second husband was, I love that you're a strong, powerful woman. And then in the devaluation, I hate attorneys. Why are you doing this? Why do you think you're so much better than everyone else? Why are you, I hate all your friends. In the beginning, he loved the way I parented. He thought I was a good mom and a great wife. And, during the devaluation, it's the way you parent is horrible, and then all the gaslighting comes in. And so if anyone doesn't know what gaslighting is, it is coercive manipulation. It is when you manipulate another person into doubting their perceptions, their experiences, and their beliefs in what happened. And so it's a highly calculated form of coercive manipulation. And so it becomes very confusing during this devaluation. And so, again, you have to look at the big overarch of it, similar with domestic violence. Narcissistic abuse, it's all about power and control. So they use manipulation, they gaslight, they do everything to control you. They want to get a reaction from you because that's control. If they can get an emotional reaction out of whatever, they have controlled you. And so now you have this devaluation phase. And then what they'll do is after they do something very horrible to you, then they'll love bomb you back. Then they'll do something horrible. They'll love bomb you back. It's called intermittent reinforcement. And so what happens with all this gaslighting, all this love bombing, then the criticism, then the love bombing, it creates this whole thing called cognitive dissonance. And you have no clue what is going on. It is so confusing. You know that something's not right, but we can't always pinpoint what it is. And so, because of all this intermittent reinforcement, the good, the bad, the good, the bad, it creates what is called a trauma bond. And a trauma bond, if you've ever heard of like Stockholm syndrome, it's where the victim falls in love with the kidnapper. It's very similar with a narcissistic relationship in this trauma bond. And I always explain it like a drug addiction because you do feel addicted to this person. And similarly to a drug addiction, the first time you use a drug, you get this very high dopamine rush. And then the next time you use again, you never get quite that same high. And so you keep using, trying to get that first high, but you never do. It's like less and less and less. And
mhm,
similar with a trauma bond with a narcissist is that it's like that because in the beginning they were so kind, they were so good to us. So in our head we're like, well, they know how to treat us well, they know how to love us, they know how to be the person that we want them to be. So we stay in this trauma bond because we think, well, maybe if I change these things about me that they're saying, then maybe I will get that first high again. But you never do because every time there's the devaluation cycle, it just gets worse and worse and worse, and to the point where there's the discard. And the discard happens, and this is what it is. It's actually the third phase is called discard. And it does feel like you are a piece of garbage being thrown out. They have used you and depleted you, and you no longer matter to them, so they discard you.
Mm.
Or you find worthiness within yourself and you leave. Those are the
Wow.
only two ways the relationship ends. And so
Wow.
you can't just say, why don't you leave? Well, you have that trauma bond, you have that addiction. And if you keep thinking that if I change these little things about me, then he will love me the way he loved me in the beginning. But
Mm.
it will just never happen. And so it's very complicated. It's very confusing. It's very complex. And
Well,
yeah, it's
Stephany,
horrible.
wow. Stephany, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, I am sure many of us viewers and listeners are sitting here listening to everything that you're saying, and so many things are going through our minds about past relationships, and we're thinking, yeah, 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 it is
Hmm.
amazing. Yes. Oh my goodness, you hit the nail. Well, you hit multiple nails on multiple heads here today. Wow, that is amazing. So here's my question. How did you know you were healed enough to help someone else?
Well, that's a really good question. And I think you even have to do a question before that question is how do you know you're healed enough to get into another relationship and not repeat the same patterns?
Preach it, sister.
Because I will tell you, I thought I was healed. You always hear people are like, "Well, time heals." So, time goes by. You slowly start to forget about this person. You try to work on yourself, lots of prayers, whatever. So, I thought I was healed. And remember, I'm still stuck in victim mindset. And when you're stuck in victim mindset, of why me? Why is all this terrible stuff happening to me? You cannot see the lessons. And until you can see the lessons, you don't know exactly what needs to be healed. And so a couple of years had passed. I thought I was ready to date again. I made out the checklist, to the universe. God, this is all the character traits, the qualities. I'm healed. I want a new relationship. I'm young, and so I put it out in the universe. Well, guess what? I met a man a week later who checked every single box.
Hmm.
So when he is saying things, well, I manifested you. I was praying for a woman like you. Well, I just manifested him too. I have the list. I even remember showing him. Here's the list. You fit everything. Divorced dad with only boys the same age as my boys. I was specific.
Wow.
But guess what? I learned I was not healed. And until you are healed, you repeat the patterns. You cannot run from the lessons.
Mhm.
And so God, in all the graciousness, I got what I wanted with all the unhealed lessons from my first marriage. So I got narcissist number two. And narcissist number two was much, much, much more challenging. So my first husband was a covert, horrible to everyone. It wasn't just me. Everyone hated him. And thank God I was only with him for 4 years. And even that, we were separated for almost a year and a half. So really, I wasn't with him for that long. And I learned my lessons. So, you know, when I was on the bathroom floor and I had that shift in perspective, I got out a journal. I'm a big journaler. I got out a journal and I said, okay, what if my ex-husbands were not monsters trying to destroy my life? What if they were here to show me some some really painful lessons, or I shouldn't say painful lessons. I got wisdom earned at a very costly price. And so I got my journal out and I said, okay, my first husband, Josh, if he is a teacher, what did he teach me? And I just spent hours just going through 14 years of my marriage. What did I learn from him? You know, one of the things that, if he was a wise teacher, one of the things that he really taught me was boundaries. You know, I I had boundaries for him. He spent 14 years having emotional and physical affairs. I did not leave. I kept praying, God. and you know, so I one of the things I could say is, well, if he's a teacher, he showed me that I have to have boundaries, because I had boundaries for him. And how many of us have boundaries for our spouse or our partner? You know, I was confronting the women. Hey, you know he's married, right? How many of us do that? But I did not have boundaries for myself. I mean, I told him, I'm like, hey, this is how it's making me feel. Stop doing that. Cheating is psychological and emotional abuse. But I didn't think I was being abused, because how many of us also do this? We put cheating over here and we put abuse over here. They're the same.
Mhm.
It's abuse. It's psychological and emotional abuse. And so, you know, I didn't know it was abusive. It was just, oh, he's just a cheater. Oh. And I'm confronting women all day long, and hyper vigilant and hyper paranoid. And so now, you know, I have my journal and I can say, thank you, Josh, for showing me that I have to have boundaries, firm boundaries.
Mhm.
So, you know, I thought when I went into my second marriage, I thought I had some pretty good boundaries. But with my second marriage, my boundaries, it was a toddler fence. You know what I'm talking about?
Mhm.
We can pick them up and move them. And so
Yes.
he would push up against my boundaries. And then I'd pick up my little toddler fence and I'd move it 5 feet over. Okay, the boundary's here. And he would push up against my boundary and I would take my little toddler fence and move it again. That's not a boundary.
Right.
I had no boundaries.
Mhm.
And so I can say one of the lessons was, Stephany, you have to have boundaries. A toddler fence is not a boundary. Being boundaries police for other people is not boundaries. You have to have your own boundaries. And I could
Absolutely.
go to my first husband and say, you know, 14 years of being cheated on, you are worthy of so much more. And so I did this with both my marriages. I went through and wrote a whole journal of all the painful lessons I learned. And then I was able to heal.
Wow. And is that what your book is comprised of that you wrote?
So the book, I actually was able to contribute a chapter in another book. It is not necessarily on that. It's more talking about leadership and how there are a lot of strong, powerful women leaders, but um, you know, so we talk about resilience. Like, how did we get these traits? How did we get these qualities? What were some of the things that we had to go through to
Mhm.
become the leaders that we are? So, you know,
Absolutely.
the empowerment. And so, you know, for me, once I was able to make that shift in perspective, to see them not as monsters, but as teachers here to teach me these lessons. And I gained this very tear filled, hard nuggets of gold of wisdom.
Mhm.
Then I knew where I needed more compassion. I knew where I needed for forgiveness, because that's another thing too. Is like, so many people, well, how can you forgive them? I'm not ready to forgive. I'm not going to do that. Well, you know, when you
Mhm.
see them as teachers, it's
Mhm.
easier to forgive them,
Yes.
because it is hard. And forgiveness is for you. It's not for them. It's to set
Right.
you free. It has,
Absolutely.
you know, I have two ex-husbands that I never had closure.
Mhm.
You know, how do you forgive someone like that? How do you forgive someone who was literally out to destroy you and destroy your life? It only comes through shifting your perspective and seeing the story differently. And when you do that, then you become the star of
Mhm,
your story. You become empowered. And
mhm,
so, with your second question of now, how do you heal? It's okay. So now we have all the lessons. Now we know what needs to be worked on. And
mhm,
so I became an EFT practitioner. And so EFT is a healing modality. It's called emotional freedom techniques. It's tapping. I don't know if you've heard of it, Rhonda, but it's kind of a rapid way to rewire your brain. And another myth is what I mentioned earlier was that um, being in a relationship with a narcissist, time does not heal.
mhm,
You have become brainwashed. And people, even therapists, will say it is very similar to coming out of a cult, the brainwashing from a cult. And
mhm,
so time does not heal that. I could sit here and do nothing, and in 10
mhm,
years, I would still be in the same place,
mhm,
having the same negative thoughts, not moving forward in my life.
mhm. Well, Stephanie, I'm just so impressed with your process of healing and how you've grown and evolved and changed. And so here we are today in 2024. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now as we wrap up?
Well, okay, that's actually interesting that you said that because I was listening to a meditation last night and it was like, walk through this one door and it's 5 years from now. So, 5 years from now, I've given my 100th keynote speech. So,
Mhm,
I'm actually working on a series of books on called When You Love a Narcissist, and it goes through, the awakening, the reconditioning, the the becoming, the vindication, and the empowerment. So kind of like the 5 stages of becoming aware
mhm,
after being in a relationship with a narcissist. So I've taken the time off right now, and my first husband that I was saying was a covert narcissist, and he spent 6 years using the legal system in the courts to further his abuse, and it's called post separation abuse. And so it doesn't end.
mhm.
It doesn't end. And he tried to alienate me from the kids, all this stuff. But then a couple months ago, he ended up committing suicide. And so it was very freeing and so many conflicting emotions. But I have 3 little boys. And so my focus is just on my kids right now. So 5 years, my kids are healed. I'm healed. We're traveling the world. I'm speaking and talking about my books.
Well, great. That is wonderful. I am so glad that you were able to be with us today, Stephanie, to share your story of overcoming. Some people have a misconception that overcoming trauma, it's like the snap of the finger, and one day you wake up and you're just over it, or they say something callous like "get over it." It's not that simple, and it is indeed a
Yeah.
process. And thank you for sharing that process with us. I really appreciate you being on the show today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on the show. And yeah, just to quickly just say something about that. The healing is a process. It is like peeling an onion. And I still I loved my husbands, and part of me is like, is that the trauma bond talking? But no, people who are in the relationships, we love them. We wanted them to change. We believed in them, but we can't. We can only change ourselves and work on ourselves and let God sort out them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you again for being on the show. And if you will just hang on for a minute while I wrap things up, I'll be right back with you, okay?
Thanks.
Thank you for being here today. Ladies and gentlemen, oh my goodness, what a journey Stephanie has been on. The road to recovery and healing has been fraught with many challenges for her, to say the least. But she is here because she's an overcomer. and she figured it out. And you can too. If you are a victim of physical or emotional domestic violence, get help. You are not alone. You don't have to suffer in silence. There is help available for you. Make sure that you get a copy of Stephany's latest book that she contributed to, Rise to Greater Heights. The link to it will be in the description under the video or in the podcast description. And so until the next time, be blessed, be encouraged, but most of all, be empowered. And I'll see you on the next edition of Empowered Heart to Heart.